The silver Bentley rolled slowly into the circular driveway of Winchester Academy, its gleaming chrome grille sparkling under the afternoon sun. The driver's door swung open and out stepped Richard Hartwell, billionaire real estate magnate, major benefactor of the school, and a man who considered humility nothing more than a disease of the poor. Richard was here for one purpose only, to pick up his 8-year-old son, Tommy. But the sight in the courtyard wiped away his perfectly carved smile, replacing it with fury. There, wearing a crisp blue janitor's uniform, stood a tall black man holding Tommy's hand. Suddenly, Richard's thunderous voice tore through the air. "Let go of my son's hand now." Heads turned. Conversation stopped. The courtyard froze for a heartbeat. The janitor, James Washington, didn't flinch. He calmly shifted his stance, subtly stepping between the trembling boy and the raging father. "Mr. Hartwell," James said evenly, "I can explain." "Explain." "What?" Richard spat, eyes blazing. "Why a janitor is touching my son. Security! Security!" Whispers rippled through the crowd. Other parents, all in designer clothes, reached for their phones, some recording, others murmuring. Tommy's voice trembled. "Daddy, Mr. James was helping me. I fell and—" "Quiet, Tommy." Richard yanked his son's arm. "I don't want you anywhere near this man." James held Richard's gaze, steady and unbroken. He knew that look, the one that decided a man's intentions based solely on the color of his skin. James was more than a janitor. 20 years ago, he had been one of the nation's leading pediatric neurosurgeons. That life ended when the son of a powerful politician died on his operating table. The death had been inevitable, yet James was falsely accused of malpractice and destroyed. His license, his savings, his reputation, all stripped away. It was then he learned the brutal truth. Skill meant nothing when prejudice was the judge, and now Richard Hartwell was repeating history. "You're right, Mr. Hartwell," James said calmly. "I shouldn't have been here. But your son's forehead was bleeding, and I used my training to help him. I was a doctor once." Silence swept the courtyard. Richard laughed harshly. "A doctor once? And I was probably an astronaut once. Don't insult me with lies." The crowd shifted uneasily, but no one dared challenge Richard, not here, where his donations ruled. James took a slow breath. "I understand your reaction, Mr. Hartwell, but this isn't over." He walked toward the janitor's closet. Richard watched him go, irritated. There was something strange about the man, a dignity that didn't belong to a subordinate employee. Richard had no idea he just challenged the wrong man. The first strike that evening, Richard was already on the phone with several school board members, demanding that James be fired. By the next morning, when James arrived at work, the staff's warmth had cooled. The same people who once greeted him with smiles now avoided his eyes. His supervisor hinted that he should stick to less visible work. James quietly agreed, because while Richard drank scotch at his exclusive club, James began collecting evidence. Over months of quiet observation, James had noticed Richard's habits, late pickups, whispered and suspicious calls from the parking lot. His finely tuned doctor's ears had caught phrases like, "The fake documents are ready. If the auditors find out, we're finished. Make sure she stays quiet." James began recording everything. He knew the law. In public spaces, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. 3 days later, Richard escalated, filing a police report accusing James of suspicious behavior toward a child. At the station, James remained calm. "Officer, I understand the need for an investigation, but I have concerns about the child's safety as well." He pulled out a notebook, detailed observations of Tommy's anxiety, isolation, and fear. The officer began taking notes. "A door to the past opens 2 weeks later. A familiar name lit up James's phone. Dr. Patricia Nias, his former resident, now one of the country's most celebrated pediatric neurosurgeons. They met in a quiet cafe. Patricia's voice was sharp with anger. "James, when I saw your name in the headlines, my blood boiled. This Hartwell doesn't know who he's up against." She slid a thick folder across the table. Medical records, letters, and statements that had been buried during his case. "And listen," she said, "Dr. Martinez kept your files. He's ready to testify you were destroyed under political pressure." The old fire lit in James's eyes. Building the case, Patricia tapped her network: a child psychologist, a civil rights attorney, and investigative journalist Michael Torres. All joined the cause. James's recordings exposed Richard's crimes: tax fraud, witness intimidation, and, most horrifying, repeated signs of physical abuse toward Tommy. The final piece fell into place one rainy night, when Tommy showed up at James's door, soaked and crying. Bruises marked his thin arms. In a halting voice, he described being locked in a room for hours and being beaten when Richard dragged out. James immediately called Patricia. "I need a discreet medical exam for a child. Signs of abuse are clear." The fall of Richard Hartwell. The trap was set. One morning, Richard pulled into the school parking lot and straight into a storm of cameras. "Mr. Hartwell, did your company evade over $15 million in taxes? What about allegations of child abuse?" Inside, James, Patricia, Michael, and the attorney sat at a table, files stacked high. X-rays showing Tommy's old and fresh injuries, financial records, and audio recordings. Michael held out a flash drive. "Mr. Hartwell, here are 47 recordings of your illegal activities. Care to comment?" Richard's face drained of color. He realized every damning conversation had been recorded in the presence of that janitor. Moments later, Victoria Hartwell arrived with Tommy. The boy ran into James's arms. Cameras caught it all: Tommy's comfort with James and his fear of Richard. Victoria's voice shook. "This man saved my son. My husband hurt him, and I was too afraid to speak." Then Patricia's voice cut through the room. "This is Dr. James Washington, Harvard-educated pediatric neurosurgeon, author, researcher. He saved over 200 children before his career was destroyed by prejudice." The crowd was silent. Within hours, Richard's empire crumbled. Bank accounts frozen, stock prices crashing. Arrest warrants issued. 6 months later, Richard Hartwell was in federal prison, serving 5 years for tax fraud and child abuse. His money meant nothing there. James Washington was now Director of Child Protection and Academic Development at Winchester Academy. The man once called a danger to children had become their fiercest protector. Tommy thrived. Victoria rebuilt her life, and James, once robbed of his career, had become a national voice for dismantling injustice. In his desk drawer sat a letter from Richard, sent from prison. "Dr. Washington, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I finally understand who you are. A far better man than me. My son is happy now. Thank you for saving him from me." James never replied. He didn't need to, because the real victory wasn't Richard's downfall. It was Tommy's. Freedom, and the proof that prejudice can be dismantled one deliberate step at a time.